Hey, look out. It's Faith Talk Live. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
We are so pumped to talk to this guy, Pastor Jeff Lyle, Church at Winder. He's got a podcast. He's got a book. He does it all. I don't know how he does it all, but he does it all. But first of all, Pastor, how are you?
I'm doing great. Lots of grace. That's how I do it. Anything I do, it's all by grace, but I'm doing wonderful today and hope you guys are too.
We are doing well. If you'll go to the website, churchatwinder.com, some great videos of the pastor and his team there just ministering, and check those out. And also check out the church. The church is in Winder. It's actually kind of in Bethlehem, which is a beautiful place, but it's at Winder. It is a great place to go to if you live in the area. We wanted to kick off now, as I asked you before we went live, how long you've been at the Church of Winder. You've been there since the first of the year. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I moved after 27 years in the same church. I was saved and I joined a church, became the associate pastor and became the lead pastor and was there 27 years. And just this year, in February of this year, really felt called by God to return to my roots and came up here to Winder and pastored. We started out with I think 125 people, left a church of about 1,100 and came to a church of 125. And it's been awesome. It's been so good. The people here are amazing. The ministries are really growing. We've experienced an incredible amount of growth. And I think primarily the thing that is most encouraging is this is one of the hungriest groups of believers I've ever had the pleasure of being connected to. And we're seeing a lot of good, very rapid fruit. And we're just excited about what God's doing in Barrow County and the Winder Bethlehem area in particular.
Now, after 27 years at the same church, was that hard to uproot and move? I mean, I'm a creature of habit, so that would be a hard thing for me to do.
Yeah, I mean, it was difficult. The on-ramp inwardly, you know how God works on the inside first before he changes things on the outside. So it was a long on-ramp. For about a year and a half, I felt like the Lord was preparing me to leave. But when the summons to leave came, it was really much easier than I expected because I had processed with the Lord the sentimentality, the fact that I would be turning over my life work to another group of people. And they've done an amazing job. I'm still great friends with all of the people down there. Beautiful work going on down there. But really, I think God just gave amazing, I call it the oil of grace. So it felt spiritually lubricated and it just moved on through. And we're having a blast, to be honest with you.
What a cool story in that, and we're so glad you are right there where you are, but for being a part of a church, you were saved in the church, you grew in the church, you became a pastor in the church. That's almost unheard of these days because it's almost like NFL trading
Right.
as far as the church is concerned. You know, I mean, people stay short period of time, and when maybe it gets uncomfortable or they just feel a whim and say, I'm done. But for 27 years, you grew and mature and led. Wow, that's just not normal, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it was I like to bloom where I'm planted, as the old saying goes, and so we worked to reform the church. It was a beautiful group when we started. It was just typical Southern small church, highly denominational, highly traditional, and really more just about kind of meeting together and loving on each other, but not a ton of mission. And so I worked for years to reform it into what I would call a New Testament church rather than a denominationally loyal church. And there was a lot of rockiness. We went through a lot of transition, but the Lord helped us to persevere. And finally, when it came down to it, I guess I was lead pastor for 20 of those 27 years. The Lord just basically said, Jeff, you've finished the work and I have a new assignment and new place. And so they sent us off well. It was a beautiful send off. And of course, we're still connected there. But I'm really, really focused on what God's doing out here in Winder. We believe that revival is coming to and through Barrow County and the region surrounding. And so we're positioning ourselves to steward that and to connect with this community in a very powerful way.
Now, not only are you a pastor at Church of Winder, you're also an author, a podcast host, and you do all kinds of great media type stuff through Transforming Truth, the website transformingtruth.org. Talk about how that came about and what made you want to start doing podcasting and being kind of media here.
Well, so I really, Transforming Truth was born of necessity. There were two middle-aged ladies that lived in North Georgia, couldn't find a church, but they knew my mother-in-law. And they said, well, Jeff, send us CDs of his preaching and teaching. We really are hungry for that. And so literally we started sending CDs, and then they started sending money saying, well, we don't have a church to tithe. And I was like, well, I can't take your money. And they said, well, we feel led to sow into it. So we formed a nonprofit called Transforming Truth that began with those two ladies and their hunger for truth. We did radio for a little bit, AM radio, and then a local TV station called us and said, hey, another church has stepped out of the Sunday morning 11 a.m. slot on TV. Would you like it? And so we raised the funds. The church did the first year, and then ever since then, it's been self-funding. That blossomed into, as the advent of the internet and media exploded, we have a YouTube channel, we have a Roku channel, and the Transforming Truth app. All of that stuff can be found on transformingtruth.org. And the podcast came about in 2020. I was diagnosed with cancer, and I took a ministry sabbatical to get physically well. Beat cancer. I'm clean. I'm healed. It was a excruciating deal. But during 2020, when I was sidelined from my pulpit, I still had a lot of content in my heart. God was speaking. So we started the Mavericks and Misfits podcast. And to our surprise, it's really taken off. And those are 30-minute segments where we just talk about kingdom stuff.
Pastor Jeff Lyle, he's the pastor of Church at Winder. He's an author, and he also has the podcast, which you just mentioned, Mavericks and Misfits. Now, with a title like that, that's something I've got to hear.
Yeah.
Because I would like to say I'm a Maverick. I think I'm more of a misfit, but I would like to check that out. You're a veteran of sorts in the ministry, and God, you've been faithful, and you hear his voice, and you move when he asks you to move. What is God saying in 2021? I would say post-pandemic, but we're still kind of dancing in it a bit. But what is God saying from now forward, you think?
Yeah, I'm wonderful question. I actually preached at the North Georgia Revival this past Sunday, and I shared what I believe is probably the foremost message that I'm hearing from the Lord. And that is the church needs to be getting intentionally and proactively prepared for the things that surround the end of the age. And I know that's probably been spoken for hundreds and hundreds of years, but I'm really feeling it, what we see going on in the culture globally, what we are seeing happening in the church, both the deep, deep hunger for the true things of God, and also the, if I can risk a critical moment, the digression in segments of the church moving away from biblical principles, moving away from clear biblical standards and morality. We're seeing that sifting and the separating of the wheat and the tares. And I feel like that God is really calling individual Christians and churches to align intentionally in the deepest of ways with his heart, with his word, and with his works. And so I feel an urgency on this hour. It may be because I'm now in the second half of my life. I'm 51 years old, and I'm realizing, we're closer than ever. And I'm deeply concerned about the way the church is becoming compromised by a whole host of influences, both political, both cultural, in the entertainment world. And the veracity of the gospel is no longer what drives the church. It seems to be something other than that. And so I believe the Lord is saying, calling us to consecration. He's calling us to sanctification, not legalism, not dead orthodoxy, but a deep, deep love, a burning heart for Jesus Christ, and preparing for his second coming. And no matter what we believe about the timeline of the second coming, we do know this: the Son of God is returning to planet Earth, and I want to be ready. I want my family to be ready, and anybody that I have the privilege of leading and influencing, I want them to be ready too.
Now, Jeff, I'm curious. You mentioned how you had a battle with cancer just this past year. What did God teach you personally through that journey, through battling it?
Yeah, I could spend probably an hour, but I'll give you the nutshell. God showed me in multiple layers, in repeated ways, that ultimately the kingdom doesn't need me. God doesn't need me. Doesn't mean I don't have value, but the kingdom is bigger than my ministry, anything I've ever done, anything I ever will do. That God's got this thing, and he can sideline Jeff Lyle for 10 months and the kingdom goes along just fine without me. And so I think he showed me that ministry had become a little too important to me. And so I was sidelined for 10 months, and I just experienced the tenderness of God, the healing of God, and an opportunity for him to speak to me over 10 months with zero ministry, almost zero ministry. And he just said, Jeff, it's not about what you do for me. It's about what I've done for you. And I have more that I'm going to do. And I'd love for you to participate. But son, I want you to know first and foremost, I love you. And you've always felt like that I needed you. And it wasn't condemnation. It was kindness. But he said, Jeff, I don't need you. I just love you. And so it was just a beautiful awakening during that time period. And I'm so grateful for it.
Wow. Love that. Pastor Jeff Lyle, a church at Winder. Okay. So you were out. The first message you preached, you were probably full of it. You were ready. You were ready to go. What was it? And who were those that got to listen to it?
Yeah, it was strange. I can tell you this. It was a woven testimony about, when Paul speaks to the church at Corinth, and he's talking about Christ's strength being perfected in Paul's weakness. And that was kind of the foundational launching point for that first message back. And it was really just weaving in the testimony of what God had shown me through brokenness, through sickness, I went 36 days where I couldn't eat solid food. And, go on a 36-day fast, but get zero credit for it because it wasn't spiritual, it was physical. And so it was really just a magnification of Jesus and his faithfulness. And I think since cancer, what I've come back with is it's not that I'm not missionally minded. I'm very missionally minded, but I really, really recognize that we need to get reacquainted with the fact that we're sons and daughters so much more than we are servants. And while sons and daughters do serve the Father, it is very easy to flip those identities and feel like sons and daughters is the footnote, but servant is the headline. And I think that we need to say, no, sons and daughters of God is the headline and servants is the footnote.
That is so good. Pastor Jeff Lyle, Church at Winder. He's got a book. It's called Figuring Out As I Go, and Mavericks and Misfits is the podcast. I'm sure you can download that wherever you get your podcasts. You can also go to transformingtruth.org. He's got some great articles out there as well. Good stuff. Show up at the church and check out the services, and absolutely check out the podcasts and the book as well. Pastor, we'd love to talk to you again. You've been such a great guest. Such a great guest. Blessings to you.
Blessings to you. Thank y'all for having me on, and we'd love to come back sometime.
Awesome. Pastor Jeff Lyle, Church at Winder. Check it out. Dan's got the website there. You can check out all the stuff that's going on, transformingtruth.org. We'll be right back. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
This is Faith Talk Live.